Hey Wargamers, let's talk about Forgeworld for a little bit. Now, a little bit ago, Games Workshop released rules for most of the Tau Forgeworld models, but a few of them didn't make the jump to 10th edition. So things like the Orca no longer have rules. It's dead. It's not even a thing anymore. I'm sorry if you 3D printed one. You don't have rules for it anymore. It's been out of production for a long time, so that's kind of not a big surprise at all. Things like the XV9 Hazard suit and any other smaller suits that Forgeworld made also don't have rules in 10th edition. Many of those have been sunsetted a while ago, but just in case you're hoping that something was going to come back like Overlie or anything like that, no, they don't have rules in 10th edition either. But most of the big units that they have made and continue to make do have rules. And there are several hugely efficient choices based on the math hammer. The Barracuda coming in at 220 points is a really good deal. The Tigershark at 275 is even better. It's basically two Barracudas strapped together. The Tigershark AX10 at 315 points, and the Taunar at a measly 685 points for a gargantuan model is another really strong pick for the points. And now, of course, in 10th, all the war gear is free. There's no, variation in cost because of, which weapons you take or anything like that. So these flat points here are really what you need to know about those models in order to take them. So from an offensive standpoint, these are all really good bangs for your buck. But there are some other picks that are in the Forgeworld Index that are worth considering particularly the Tetra. Tetras are 80 points for two. They form a single unit though. So even though there are two Tetras, it's just one unit. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, for 80 points, that is a really attractive price for that unit. Everything else is more in shades of gray, but let's hop into the data cards and pick them apart, talk about their strengths, weaknesses, and what you might want to do with these things if you happen to have some Forgeworld laying around. All right, let's start off talking about the Rvarna here. So the Yvahra is one of those units that people always want to be good because it's cool. It's this big battle suit. It's one of the two Riptide variants that are produced by Forgeworld. Everyone wants that to be good because it's just like a big battle suit with big guns, right? So people want it to be good. Unfortunately, in 10th, it still isn't quite there. So let's look at the stat line here. We got movement 8, toughness 10, 2 up save, 5 up invul, 15 wounds, 7 up leadership, 4 OC. Like, that's decent durability. It also has the fly keyword now, which is weird. I'm almost certain that it's never had that before. It doesn't have jetpacks. It's been just this walkie boy. So now it has fly, even though it doesn't have jetpacks, which is interesting. So I guess that's a good thing. But yeah, so the stat line is fine. The fact that it has fly is better. Looking at its weapons here, the pulse ammunitions cannon, range 60, D6 plus 2 attacks. It has 2 of these things, so that's an average of 11 shots. It's hitting on 4s with a profile of strength 8, -1 AP, 2 damage. Like, that's a decent profile, but it's essentially a missile pod, right? It's essentially a bunch of missile pods. And the missile pod strength 7, this is strength 8, so you get some different thresholding there, but really it's not that big of a difference. And for the price of this thing, you'd really want more than just 11 missile pod shots, right? Like, you can get almost that from a crisis suit, right? If you give a crisis suit 3 missile pods, that's 6. So I guess 2 crisis suits would have the same output here for a lot cheaper. There's not the output that you'd want here. You either want to have more attacks or, ideally probably an additional tick of AP, additional tick of damage. Like, if this is strength 8 minus 2 AP, 3 damage, I think we're talking a totally different ball game. Looking at its abilities, it has a built-in battlesuit support system. Makes sense. If you're taking a weapon with blast, you want to be able to fall back and still shoot, so that's great. Has weapon support system built in, also good. The thing that makes Riptide and Riptide variants unique historically and still in 10th edition is their Nova abilities. Here, Nova abilities are a once per game mechanic. So in 10th edition, Games Workshop said, we're not going to mess around with like mortal wounds or anything like that. You don't have to roll dice. It's just something that happens once per game. And I don't know, that kind of sucks. I would much rather have something that was, a little bit of a trade-off, but you could use it every turn rather than something that is, conceptually good that you can only use once. That's not quite what I envision as being a reliable thing or something I'm going to be able to play around so much. But alas, that's where it's at now. So the Nova ability here is that if you're targeted by something that has a higher strength than your toughness, which is 10, then you -1 from the wound roll. So if they're wounding you on 3s or 2s, you are wounding on 3s or 4s instead, which is good, right? Like -1 to wound is good, but the fact that it's only against strength 11 or higher is not great. Certainly those weapons would be targeting this unit, but I just would like that to be like a flat thing. So it's a little unfortunate that it's a once per game and it's only against these certain weapons. That's a little underwhelming. As far as the output here, I just wish that we had a little bit more for the price. I think that's the biggest issue, is that it's just overcosted for what you get really based on this data card. Moving on to the Yvahra, the Rvarna's faster sibling, we have a stat line of movement 10, toughness 9, 2 up, 5 up, 15 wounds, 7 up leadership, and 4 OC. So yeah, the less durable, faster version of the Rvarna. Keywords are the same, except for, of course, it has Yvahra instead of Rvarna for a keyword. Looking at its weapons, it has a flechette pod, which is essentially the same thing that Shaosun has. Instead of an ion cannon, it has an ionic discharge cannon, which is a worse version of the ion cannon for basically every reason. It's range 18, d6 plus 1 shots, hitting on 4s, and then the profile goes 7-1-2, or you can overcharge for 8-2-3. I don't know why you would ever use this over an ion cannon. It is not very good. It has no built-in thing against vehicles, which was one of the nice things about earlier versions of the ionic discharge cannon on the Yvahra, is that it would be Melta or Haywire or something. Like it'd be, if this was like anti-vehicle, 3 up, 4 up, like whatever, that would be awesome. I would take this perhaps, but as it is, like, why would you ever take this over an ion cannon? The ion cannon's just better. Phased plasma flamer, ignores cover torrent, 12-inch range, flat 10 shots, 6-1-1 for the profile. The fact that it's just a flat 10 is interesting, right? Like in the past, it's been a flamer weapon, so you've rolled for it. That's just a flat 10 is interesting. It's reliable at least, but it's only 1 damage. Really not that great. The days of the flamer being like 3 damage, and I can't remember if it was like -2 or -3 AP. Like those were the days, right? That was a long time ago. We're not there anymore. So the plasma flamer really not delivering as much output as you would want. As far as the Nova ability goes, it says, once per battle before this model makes a normal, advance, or fallback move, it can use this ability. If it does, till the end of the phase, its move characteristic is 18. Cool, but that should just be its normal movement is 18. If you're gonna give it these little itty bitty guns, you should at least give it enough movement to actually use them. Having a move characteristic of 18 would be much better. I still don't think it would be worth taking the Yvahra out, but that's a pretty weak sauce Nova ability, I think. So Yvahra, unfortunately, is being tabled again this edition, which is unfortunate because I have several. Tetras. Okay, we got a lot to say about Tetras. Tetras probably have the most improved award in the index. They have movement 14, toughness 7, 4 up save, 7 wounds, 7 leadership, 2 OC. That's a really decent profile. It's probably the best profile they've ever had. They're relatively durable now compared to any iteration in the past. As far as their weapons go, they have a couple pulse rifles. Who cares? That's not why we're bringing them. I'm sorry to say, if you're bringing the Tetra for the pulse rifle, unless you got kind of like some 5D chess thing going on, you're probably doing it wrong. I'm sorry to say. I'll be harsh and say that, yeah, we don't bring Tetras for the pulse rifles. What we do bring them for, though, is their abilities. Now, Tetras are exclusively, essentially, observers. And observers come in a couple different flavors in the index, right? We have your standard observers, which are basically any unit in the book except for auxiliaries, where they can spot, and if they have marker lights, they give you ignore cover. That's great. Then we have specialty observers, right? Like Pathfinders allow you to observe for 2 units. Stealth suits allow you to reroll 1s to wound, which is a phenomenal ability. And then we have Tetras that have high intensity marker lights. And what high intensity marker lights do is allow you to reroll all your hits for the spotted unit. Now, that's good, but not universally useful. Let me explain. So, in general, full rerolls to hit is rare in 10th edition, right? We don't really have a source of that. And so just on the face of it, having full rerolls to hit is good, right? One of the biggest things that we look for rerolls to hit is Shadowsun. Shadowsun has a reroll aura, reroll 1s to hit. And so we want to have, some of our most influential units like Crisis Suits teams, let's say, or Broadsides, whatever, those generally want to be by Shadowsun. But that means that everything's clustered together, and that gives us a less dynamic, less flexible play style. And so Tetras come in here and they say, hey man, you don't got to hang out with Shousen. You can come hang out with me, or you can go do whatever you want, right? You can go wherever you want and I will give you rerolls to hit. And that is liberating, right? That's great. The problem here though, the drawback, the cons, let's say, is that they, again, are only observers. So they offer no offensive capability virtually. And so that means that for 80 points that you're paying for the smallest unit size here, which is 2 Tetras, for 80 points, you're giving up 80 points of shooting. So you better be sure whatever you're re-rolling, you're getting 80 points worth over the course of the game. Whatever you're re-rolling your hits on, you better be picking up 80 points more of shooting because of that, in order to make this actually a useful investment. Additionally, guided units are generally already hitting on 3s and in some cases hitting on 2s, right? Commanders are hitting on 2s when they're guided. Breachers are hitting on 2s when they're guided. So, if you are hitting on 2s, certainly rerolling 1s is exactly the same with one exception, as rerolling all your hits, right? You're basically doing exactly the same thing. Hitting on 3s, rerolling 1s to hit is, also very comparable to rerolling all failed hits. So, you're not getting a ton of advantage over that. And certainly if you're comparing, I could either reroll 1s to hit, or I could just hit on 3s and then reroll 1s to wound. Maybe you're not getting that much value out of that, right? So there's certainly some trade-offs here in choosing who you're using as your spotter and everything like that, right? I think in general, going with the Shadowsun reroll to reroll 1s and then the stealth team reroll 1s to wound for spotting, I think that's a really strong combo that's probably in most cases stronger than this. However, Tetras do open up some interesting possibilities here because they allow you to reroll all your hit rolls. So, if you are hitting on 2s when you're guided, right, you have just as much chance of failing your hit as you do of getting a critical hit, right? So you have just as much chance of rolling a 1 as you do getting a 6. And so if you're going to be hitting on 2s, like in the case of Breachers, and you're being guided by a Tetra, you can select to reroll your successful hits that are not criticals, right? So that means your 2s, your 3s, 4s, and 5s. You could reroll those in hopes of getting a 6. And if you do that, you're actually coming out ahead, right? Because your chances of failing are 1 in 6. Your chances of succeeding and getting a crit are also 1 in 6. But if you succeed, you're actually picking up 2 additional shots. So your chances of losing 1 shot or gaining 2 actually come out in favor of gaining 2. And so you're probably on average going to come out ahead in that equation. So there's some tricky little things that you can do with that because it's flat rerolls to hit, not just your failed. So there is a little bit of tactics that you can use there with your Tetras. But in general, I do think that the Shadow Sun reroll aura combined with the stealth reroll to wound is going to be a stronger combo for a lot of units. We do have some nice other abilities here. They are infiltrators, which has its own value in terms of aerial denial. It also allows you to be an observer from different vantage points that you might not otherwise have. So those things are good. I think it'd be really great if these things had scout, because then you could deploy kind of out in the open and then scoop behind some ruins or something, kind of bait your opponent in a particular way. That would be good. And they also would be phenomenal if they had lone operative, but of course that's getting pretty wish listy there. So if they had lone operative, I don't know if that would change the calculation on the optimal choice of observer and guiding and everything like that, but that certainly would be another asset for the Tetra in this grand equation that would be worth considering. So I think the Tetras are decent. I don't think they're game breaking because of the things you have to give up in order to get them, though. Remora stealth drones. These are beautiful models. I love these models so much. I'm glad they've been restored a little bit to what they've done in the past. So they have all the war gear that they used to have. They kind of do some of the same stuff that they used to do. So they're very much restored to being Remora stealth drones, which is good. They have movement 16, toughness 6, 3 up save, 5 wounds, 7 leadership, 0 OC, because they're drones, I guess. So you're not taking them for anything other than their kind of area denial and shooting abilities, which is fine. For the range weapons, they have Remora seeker missiles, which are essentially just seeker missiles, which is good. And then they have twin long barrel burst cannon, which is a twin length burst cannon, basically. It has 4 shots hitting on 4s, strength 6 -1 damage. So yeah, it's like the long barrel part of it. The long barrel part there is that it has 24-inch range, and then it has the strength 6 -1 AP. So burst is fine, not great. 2 full seeker missiles on this thing, also good. I love seeker missiles. Take all the seeker missiles you can. It's awesome. As far as their keywords go, they no longer have the aircraft keyword, which is probably like the best improvement to stealth or to Remoras, is that they are no longer aircraft, right? The fact that they lost a keyword is probably the best thing that's happened to them. And that they are no longer limited in the units, or like the number of times you can take them, right? In 9th edition, at the end of 9th edition, you could only have 2 Remora total. And that was pretty piddly. Now you can take, the normal allotment, right? So that's great. They have core, for their abilities, they have infiltrators and stealth. Both of those are very good. The fact that they're -1 to hit is, to be expected based on them being stealth drones. That's good. And then they have the aerial disengagement ability, which is once per turn, right? So not once per game or anything like that, once per turn. When an enemy unit ends a normal, advance, or fallback move with a 9, you can do a normal move up to 6 away. So that's awesome. I really like that. That's, aside from losing aircraft, I think that's the second best thing, right? They can be super cagey, right? If someone gets close to them, they're like, nope, not going to do that. I'm going to back away. Which is cool. So it's cagey. You have defensive play there, of course, if you're trying to stay away from them, or you have offensive applications, right? You could get them much closer to that unit if you wanted to, or you could, sneak on top of, you could sneak on top of an objective, I suppose. They have OC 0, but you could do something to, mess with their movement or something like that by blocking. So that's cool. And again, because they're not aircraft, you can really do that. If they're aircraft, there's different rules for how their bases interact with models and stuff. So the fact that they're not aircraft is useful here as well. The Taunar, the big tuna, the supremacy armor. Let's talk about it. So movement 8, 13 toughness, 2 up, 5 up, save, 30 wounds, 7 leadership, 10 OC. I think that's about where we would expect it to be. As far as its weapons go, you have 2 different arm weapon options. You have the Fusion Eradicator or the Tri-Axis Ion Cannon. The Fusion Eradicator is very nice. It's a 24-inch Melta 3 shot. So having 10 of these things, if you have it on both arms, is 10 24-inch melt to 3 shots. Like, that's just good, right? Like, that's a really really thick load of melta that's coming out of that thing. It's good. It's hard to argue with that, and that's 24 inches makes it relevant, right? If it was 12 inches like the normal fusion blaster, that thing would be dead to me. But at 24 inches, I love it. The tri-axis cannon is decent. It's doing the same thing that we've been doing with ion cannon, but here it's stronger because it's on a Taunar. So strength 8 or strength 9, -2, -3, 2 or 3 on overcharge, right? Like, that's also like good, but I think the Fusion Eradicator is just flat out going to do more damage when you're able to land the shots. And 10, like I said, 10 melt to 3, so it's melt to 3, it's not even melt to 2. Like, that's just, again, good. For the back weapons, you have either the Nexus missile launcher, which has 36-inch range, which is pretty good. Strength 8, -3, 2 damage. I think that's a relevant weapon. There are some places where the Math Hammer suggests that that's actually probably one of the better choices you could make. But it hits some odd thresholds in other places, right? Most of the time, some of the other options are going to be better, just because this is kind of at an in-between ground of volume of fire and strength and damage and that sort of stuff. Your two other choices for the back weapon are the Pulse Ordnance Driver, which is funky. It's definitely different. These giant guns, right, are strength 5, -1, 3 damage. So like on the surface there, that's not that impressive. You get 8 shots per gun, so that's 24 shots on the back because it has 3 of them. The thing that sells this though is anti-infantry 2-up. So if you're targeting infantry, this thing gets a lot better, and doing 3 damage is highly relevant. So that's really good against like invul save infantry, right? If you're looking at your Elder or anything like that that have an invul save and are also infantry, if you're looking at Custodes, right, like the 3 damage profile here is clutch. So that is relevant in certain matchups, certainly. The other option is the heavy rail cannon array, and if you take that, you also get the fragmentation cluster shell launcher. But we're really talking about the heavy rail cannon array. That's where the value's at. That thing has devastating wounds and is heavy, of course, so you're probably going to be hitting on 3s with it. Strength 26, -5 AP, 16 damage. 16 damage with devastating wounds is that's a lot of damage, right? That's a lot of mortal wounds when it procs, and so that can be your best bet against knights in a lot of cases, or anything else. Because this is just a vehicle, it can start on the board, so you can shoot this turn 1. You have all that built-in goodness there, with just being a big old battle suit. So like, there's a lot of things to like about this, and so both the basically all these different loadouts have a little bit of variability and have their time in the sun in terms of what their best matchup is. But I think probably if I were to be bringing one, I would be bringing the heavy rail cannon with the Fusion Eradicators would kind of be my angle on this thing. It's made even better because of one of its abilities, which is Coordinated Strike. It says when it's guided, it gets automatic rerolls of 1 to hit, which is very good, right? We were just talking about how Shadow Sun having reroll 1s to hit is a very useful thing. Here, that's true, and it's built in. So having 1s to reroll to hit is awesome. You could, pair this with the stealth suit, right? And you get built-in reroll 1s to hit, and then you get reroll 1s to wound. Like that's money right there, right? So you get a lot of value out of that, and the Taunar does come to play when we look at the Math Hammer. It's a good investment. All right, the Barracuda. Again, the Barracuda and the Tigershark, I think, are just absolutely beautiful sculpts. The recent versions of them, just blew me out of the water when they were released, and I want them to be good. And in this case, the Barracuda is just a better hammerhead. It's just like flat better. Toughness 10, 3-up, 5-up save, 14 wounds, 7 leadership, 0 OC because it's an aircraft. Right, so it has a built-in invuln save. Like that's, right, that alone is a great selling point. So it's just a better deal than a hammerhead. As far as the weapon loadouts go, it has a couple wing weapons, so you can either take cyclic ion blasters or burst cannons, long barrel burst cannons, and then it also has missile pods on its wings, and you can load it up with seeker missiles. You're definitely going to be taking the seeker missiles because why not? They're free. The missile pod's built in. As far as the wing weapons, though, cyclic ion versus the long barrel burst cannon, they perform similarly against most targets. At least if you're looking at the whole model scale, right? Like individually, these things are going to be stronger or weaker against certain targets, but generally, there's not as much of a difference as you might think because they are, similar strength, and there's not a huge difference between 0 and -1 against a lot of targets and that sort of thing. So they perform similar against each other. Burst has better range, but the ion can overcharge, and since it's a vehicle, you're only going to be taking 3 mortals if you fail that. So I generally think the ion is going to be the more effective choice in terms of actually delivering hits. If we look at the main weapons that it has, it can take either the Swift Strike railguns, the Swift Strike burst cannon, or an ion cannon. The burst cannon is really efficient against things that are less than toughness 6. So that's because it's wounding on 3s. So anything that's going to be wounding on 3s is going to do really well against this because it's got 16 shots. That's a lot of shots. And then the railgun is just 1 shot, so totally different end of the spectrum. Strength 20 -5, d6 + 6 damage. That thing can, land some damage too. If we look at its abilities, it has Agile Dogfighter, so it's -1 to hit, so basically stealth. It's always good, right? Like, why not? That's good. So like the Barracuda is a nice package, right? It's if you want a gun on wings, the Barracuda will do it. And it delivers a good volume of fire and gives you some good options here. So I like the Barracuda. I think it does really well. And if we look at the Math Hammer again, it performs well across the board depending on loadout. The Tigershark is basically 2 Barracudas strapped together for less than twice the price. So as you might expect, it's the more mathematically efficient choice in almost every case. The Tigershark has toughness 11, 3 up, 5 up, 18 wounds, 7 leadership. Again, great. As far as the main weapons go, you have access to basically the same things: the ion cannon, the Swift Strike burst cannon, and the Swift Strike railgun. You can take burst cannons on the wings as well. And then it has a bunch of seeker missiles and missile pods too. So those are all the same. One thing that you can do is switch out its transport bay, which as written allows you to take 12 tactical drones. I can't even okay, the transport bay lets you take 12 tactical drones. What a waste, right? Like, what a waste of an ability. That is just garbage. So, yeah, you're going to get rid of that, and you're going to take the Sky Spear missile rack, and that thing slaps, right? So it's d6 + 1 shot, so it's pretty variable. Strength 6, -1, 1 damage, but it's anti-fly 3 up with blast. So if you got any jump pack infantry or anything like that, this thing's going to kind of, bring some pain against those. So the Sky Spear missile rack is pretty nice. And way better than hauling around 12 tactical drones. Like, just what a waste of techs. And so, yeah, the missile rack is really the thing that's different here, that makes it different than the Barracuda. When we look at its abilities, it, of course, has For the Greater Good, which is good, but a little complicated, right? The fact that we have all these different weapons here, especially in the Tigershark, but also for the Barracuda, we have all these different weapons here. We're probably going to want to shoot them at different targets, which means we are unlikely to guide these units. These units are much more likely to be observers. And if we do that, we can use Coordinate to Engage for 1 CP to give them +1 to hit, so they'll still be hitting on 3s, but we can split fire then. So that's the key with these flyers, is we don't want to be trying to have them serve, or rather, we don't want them to be guided. We want them to be observers, because they have so many different weapons. Those probably need to go in different places. The Tigershark also has the strafing run ability, which allows you to select a unit that you shot at that doesn't have the fly keyword, and they have to take a battle shock test. Causing battle shock tests is awesome. Do that as much as you can, right? So like, even if it's just throwing a missile pod into a unit just to kind of throw away those shots, and get it on your radar for strafing run, do that, because causing battle shock tests is very useful. As far as everything else, like, it's just a solid unit and it does a lot of damage. It brings a lot of hurt. There is one thing that I'm going to mention about the Tigershark that is seemingly unintentional, but is worth a disclaimer. And so the issue with the Tigershark's base is that it is larger than 6 inches, which means that when it comes in from reserve, it technically has to stay at the table edge for a full turn before it can actually do anything, which means that if you bring it in on turn 2, you actually don't get to use it until turn 3. And that's an issue, right? So if that's true, if that isn't FAQ'd, if that isn't sorted out, the Tigershark is dead to me. But if that isn't the case, if I can still bring it in turn 2 and do a nice bit of damage, then I think the Tigershark has some play, has some value at least. Of course, it's a lot of points to sink into a single flyer, but you do get a lot of damage out of it. So we have to kind of keep an eye on that and see how Games Workshop deals with it, if they deal with it at all. But I wanted to mention that before we moved on. The AX10 Tigershark is the anti-Titan version, and it's kind of hilarious. So the thing that makes it funny to me is that it has the Titan Hunter ability, and it says this model's twin heavy rail cannon and seeker missiles have the anti-Titanic 3-up ability while targeting a unit within half range. The range on the twin heavy rail cannon is 120 inches. So you're going to be within half range, right? Like, so that's hilarious. And then having anti-Titanic 3-up combined with devastating wounds and twin linked means that you're going to be, you're very likely to be getting your devastating wounds on this thing. So you're going to get your 12 damages mortal wounds here. That's cool. And then you have your seeker missiles too, right? And those things have range 48, so you're less likely to be within range here, but still you're probably going to get it. And that just puts out a ton of damage, right? So between the devastating wounds on the rail cannon plus the seeker missiles, having anti-Titanic 3-up is a huge boon to this, taking out Titanic models. The Taunar on its own is better for this, right? Like, it's not an aircraft, it starts on the board. You can take the rail cannon there plus all the other guns, and it will do work for you. But this thing will take a night out when it shows up, right? Like, but then after that, you have lower efficacy because you spent all your seeker missiles too. So there's that. So like, it's fine if you are playing in a Titanic heavy environment, but probably not something that you're going to see at a tournament table. All right, so what does it all mean? Well, if we're looking at the math hammer, we see that Tigersharks, Barracudas, Taunar, all those things perform very well. Sadly, the Rvarna, the Yvahra, the Remoras, those things really aren't on the radar as far as competitively priced units go. But the Tigershark, Barracuda, and Taunar are. All those things do very well in the math hammer. Again, the Tetras are worth considering, but they are highly context specific. And if we're looking at what we're giving up to what we're getting, I think it's a pretty murky proposition. Looking at the Tigershark and Barracuda, we see that both of those are competitively priced, assuming that we can get them on the board at the latest turn 2. If, again, those issues with the Tigershark showing up on turn 3 or whatever don't get resolved, then this kind of all goes out the window. But they can be the most efficient choices against things like Custodes. If we look at ion builds, so the ion cannon, the cyclic ion blasters on the wings, those things are very good, especially if they're overcharging. Those are the most most points efficient option against Custodes in the entire index. In a very close second are broadsides with heavy rail rifles and plasma rifles. And so if you don't have a Tigershark, you don't have Barracudas, or you want to be able to do this turn 1, broadsides are your unit. Now, if you watched my earlier point efficiency video, you might be a little confused on why I'm saying broadsides are the choice here. Turns out there is a minor error in my spreadsheet for the broadsides where I didn't give them devastating wounds for the rail rifle, and so they're actually much better than what I showed in that video, and we'll come back to that in another video later on to shore that up. But broadsides very close second here, so can be used just as well as Tigersharks and Barracuda for taking out custodians. They have the burst and ion loads are both consistently favorable for things with toughness less than 7, so toughness 6 or lower. Both the burst and the ion loadouts, so the Swift Strike burst cannon or the ion cannon loadouts, are both also very good in those contexts as well. The fact that they're flyers or aircraft more specifically without the hover keyword does limit their applications and does put again another stone on the scale for broadsides over either of these two. If they had hover, they could start the game on the board and we wouldn't have any issues. But the fact that they don't have hover means you have to wait, and so that reduces their output and therefore proportionally reduces their efficacy as well, their efficiency rather. The Taunar hits very hard against Land Raiders and Knights. The Rail and Melta loadout is extremely points efficient. It's your top slots. Is one of your top picks for things that are toughness 10 or higher, and can be up to 20% more efficient than broadsides in those rolls. So you're getting a lot of damage out from that heavy rail cannon. The AX-10 also does well if you're going against Titanic things, or something where the AX-10 is going to trade well. If you don't know what your opponent is, then the Taunar is definitely the safer bet and the more reliable one on that. Like I said, sadly, you got to pour one out for the Yvahra again. It just didn't show up in the calculations at all. It's just not pulling its weight. But yeah, Tigersharks, Barracudas, Taunar, and maybe Tetras are all things that are worth considering. I'm going to look forward to playing games of 10th with at least some of these guys, dust some things off the shelf, and get them on the table. It'll be great. So let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, happy wargaming. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you want to pick up an invasive wargaming model, now is the time. We're down to about our last dozen copies of that. And if you stuck around to this point in the video, maybe you want to join our Discord community as well. There's a link in the description below. Special thanks to all my supporters over on Patreon, but especially the folks that you see on your screen now. If you want to help make more invasive wargaming videos, consider joining our community over there as well.